What is up, current tech fans? Welcome back to another garage tinkering video. If you're one of the OG followers of this channel and you remember 7 or 8 months ago, back when we were teeny tiny and had like 400 subscribers, I created a thing that I called at the time AutoCC, and it was designed to be a control center that would synchronize a suite of ESP-powered devices in your car. At the time, I'd never considered getting into like gauge and dashboard design, and it was used predominantly to control underglow and interior lighting and just like fun stuff around the car. And I wondered, can I adjust it and tweak it a bit and actually include it with the gauges that we're now working on in order to allow you to control the UI of all of your gauges from your mobile phone, or from any other device for that matter? And I'm happy to say the answer is yes. So you get a better understanding of what we're talking about here, let me just show you what it does. This demo requires 3 things: a device with which we're going to interact with everything. We're just going to use this laptop, but you could just as easily use a mobile phone. You'll need a board and screen combo. This is the prototype version, the version 1.0 of the board that I've just released. Version 1.1 is out and available for pre-order, along with a special anti-glare super high brightness screen. This isn't one of those. This is just the prototyping setup. If you want to see more details about these ultimate gauge board PCB and screen combos, which are perfect for your car and are going to come with a whole ecosystem of stuff, including this software, head over to garagetinkering.com and you'll be able to find all the information you need about them. And then we have a server, which is just a standard ESP32 dev module. It's not an S anything or a C anything. It's just a standard Room 32D. So at the moment, they're just 3 individual devices. So let's start them all up. On the screen right now, we have a speed that we're going. We're not going very fast right now. And the unit, 0 miles per hour. Then I'm going to plug in my server. As you'll see, that does absolutely nothing. What that has done is created a web server. So if I bring up my Wi-Fi, I can connect to what I've called the SSID in this, which is AutoCC for my 350Z. Connect to that. Oh, and there we go. Because it connected to it, the website refreshed. And this is the IP address that the host of this web server is at, 192.168.4.1. As you can see, it's picked up the speedo here, and it says it has 2 options. So if we go into here, we've got the speed vertical and the speed unit is miles per hour. So if I click on the miles per hour one here and turn it off, this jumps to kilometers an hour. And let me just bring this in so you can see the 2 happening at the same time. Boop, miles per hour, kilometers an hour, miles per hour, kilometers per hour. And then similarly, the speed vertical, let's say I shift this left. It goes up. All the way up. So I've set a range of -100 to +100. And you can, as you slowly scroll this down, there we go. Yeah, and we can move it all the way down to +100, stick it in the middle, switch that onto miles per hour, whatever. This is basically what this system does. But this thing in its entirety has something that runs behind it, which is very clever. And it's the fact that this is completely stateless and optionless. It knows absolutely nothing about this. So how, when it's on the home page, I mean, it's not going to show anything now because it's not connected, but how did it show that speedo with 2 options in this list? And it's because of the way the whole system works. So let me give you a guide. This whole thing is made up of 2 things: server and clients. And these clients, there can be any number of them. and they can be in whatever form. They could be buttons, or they could be lights, or they could be screens, or they could be whatever they need to be, so long as when we set up the options for these, they're done in a certain way, in a certain format that the server understands. And how this works is when you supply power to everything all at the same time, these all boot up and the clients self-initialize and they say, okay, we've got, like in that example, two options that we've set up. One of them is the vertical position, and that's a range that goes from -100 through to +100, and it starts at 0, so its default is at 0. Plus it has an is it miles per hour, which is a switch, and that can be either 0 or 1, it's on or off, and it starts as on. So I just create these in a options array as the start as my setup for this screen. I also tell my client who is my server. So who is my server by allocating its MAC address. Just lets me make sure that the information I'm sending around is secure and is going to the right place. Then the server at the same time boots up, it gets power, and it waits a second, well, actually 3 seconds, and then it looks through the list of who are my clients. So let's say this is client A, and we've also down here got client B, client C, and client D. It'll start by going, okay, client A, tell me about your options. And it'll say, right, okay, well, I've got a vertical position thing. This is its label, this is its range, this is its default, and it's this type. And send that back. And server will go, great, got that. What else have you got? And it goes, okay, cool. I've also got this is miles per hour thing. And it's a bool, it's a switch type, it's 0 or 1, it starts as on. It goes, great, okay, I've got all that. I've got your two options up here. Is that everything? And this one goes, yep, that's cool, that's everything. It goes, great. And it checks that one off its list. Then it goes to the next one. It goes, okay, client B, what have you got? This one comes back and goes, oh, I've got the exact same setup because I'm the same thing. It goes, okay, cool. And then it puts those ones in. And then client C is a underglow controller. So this one's got a color and it's got an on-off state. So this one sends back, okay, well, I've got a color, which is an RGB type, and it's currently set to purple. And that's one of my options. I've also got a switch, whether or not it's on and off. It goes, great, okay, cool. And it sends all this up to here, 2 options. And when it's gone through the entire list of all the clients and they've all come back and said, hey, this is what I have, the server will then boot up a little web server like we've just seen, and it will make a list of all of the clients. And then when we click on a client, it'll say how many options each one has, as well as the name that we've allocated them during the setup. And when we click through to one, it goes to a second page, and those options are listed out, as you've just seen, by their various typings, whether it's a range type, whether it's an on-off switch type, whatever it might be. Then when you click on these, the server knows which item in the entire scope of the project that has been clicked on relates to what single thing from a single client. So let's say I'm in client B and I clicked on option 2. It knows it's got to go to client B, and it knows it's related to its second option because we allocate special IDs to everything throughout the entire setup process, which monitor the state of everything. And once it realizes which special ID relates to which individual controller, it sends it to the right device. That device knows that a change has come in. The callback function happens. It changes it in its internal memory, changes it in its internal settings, and it changes it on the screen or on how it pushes out to the lights, however it may be. The big thing to know about this is it's completely stateless and completely non-persistent. So if I decide to remove this thing from the system entirely, from now on, whenever this server starts up, that one, it just won't be there because it doesn't need to exist anymore. I don't need to inform the server that it's gone. I don't need to update its options list because all of the stuff in the server is created dynamically at startup every time the system starts up. So if the clients change, the visual elements that you change in your UI, which will probably typically be on your phone. If you're sat in a car, you'll probably get your phone out and twiddle with your settings a little bit, and you'll sit there and make things move to make it look how you want to make it look whilst you're actually sat in your car. And you can do that. You don't have to worry about updating the server a lot. Now, I know obviously not all of you have got 25 plus years of coding experience, so some of the principles that we're talking about here might just be a bit like, so what do you do if you want to start learning this stuff, but you don't really know where to get started? Well, one great way is with brilliant.org. They're presenting the learning of things centered around maths and science and data science and AI and programming in a really interesting way. And it encourages you to delve into different subjects and areas that you might find interesting. You can set up daily learning goals and have like 15 minutes a day of just delving into some maths or some data science or whatever of those areas interests you the most. If you enjoy following my content, but some of the coding ideas go a little bit over your head, the coding course is a really good one to start with, and it'll get you up to speed pretty quickly. So if you're like me and you're interested in healthy learning habits and upskilling yourself in different areas, be sure to check out brilliant.org/garage tinkering to get yourself a 30-day free trial. And then if you go for an annual subscription, you'll get yourself 20% off. Anyway, let's get back to the complex stuff. It's all well and good me describing it in a theoretical way, but in practice, how easy is it to set up? Because that's the blocking force for a lot of people when they're going to try and use an integrated system like this. And I've deliberately made it very, very easy, as I'll show you. So this is the interactive gauge that I've just shown you that has two things on it right now. It's got the speed value and the speed unit. And that's it. That's all it's got on there. It's just a simple LVGL display. But then when we set it up, I include my AutoCC client, which is part of the AutoCC suite. There is the client and the server. Your server code obviously goes on server. We set up the MAC address of our server. And then everything we need to do this whole setup is basically in these lines. So we have the ID of each one of these things. Now, these IDs can be the same across different devices. So if I took this same code and uploaded it onto two different screens, it'd still work because the actual system behind the scenes uses unique identifiers as it's building itself. So you can use the same ID, but obviously each one within a single document like this has to be different. So we've got the speed vertical, which is just the speed vert, and the speed unit. Then we've got the functions that describe what happens when one of the values related to that ID changes. So if the position changes, then I'm just moving the alignment of the speed value, so the big zero, and I'm moving it to whatever value is being passed into it. And then because I wanted the miles per hour, kilometers an hour to move with it, I also moved the unit, which is the miles per hour, kilometers an hour. And I move that to the new value plus 60. So it stays 60 pixels below it no matter where I move it to. Then we've got what happens when the speed unit is changed. And all it does is set the text. And if it's positive, then it's miles per hour. If it's negative, then it's kilometers per hour. That new value getting passed through at the moment is either a 1 or a 0. This, which I'll talk about in a minute, and how we're going to expand on it, but we'll get back to that. Then we've got the defaults for each one of those things. So the vertical position starts as 0. Now this is the key bit. This is the structure option setup, as I've called it. This is part of AutoCC, this structure. And we're just defining our options. So we're defining all of the things that are changeable within this design. So we've got our speed vert, which is our ID from the top. What its label is going to be in the UI, the type that it is, Is it a range or a switch? Then we've got the minimum and the maximum for each one of those things. So for a range, you can set up any values, whereas for a switch, min-max is 0 and 1. They're the only two options. What is the default value? So we just, set the default value here. And then finally, what function runs when that thing changes? So that we can make sure that when we're making alterations to the speed vertical range, it's updating things here, but that might have a knock-on effect on something else. So you might want to, nest these inside each other, or have multiple things like the vertical up-down position doesn't just change the speed value, it changes the units as well. So we have to make sure we have a function there that allows us to describe all the things that are going to change. So that is it. Then everything else is just set up absolutely as normal. You could change these to the current values. So there are functions built in within AutoCC that will allow you to request what the current value of a thing is. So for example, with this speed text, the on-off, if we call what the instantiator is, cc client dot get value, then we can get value based on the ID, which for this is speed unit. And that will give us whether or not it is currently set to a 1 or a 0. So it's just requesting this, not from the server, but from AutoCC built into the plugin within the gauge itself. And then we could do the normal kind of like swapper in there if we wanted to do that. And obviously, if you're going to go down this route, then you would probably change these labels to constants and make sure that you're keeping all that information together. So you could do it like this, but instead of doing it like this, I found the generally easier way is to just set it up however you want it. And then you make sure that at the very end of your setup function, we call the unOption changed function, which is the callback function that the AutoCC uses. So every time you make a change in your server, it distributes those changes out to your individual devices. And if that device goes, oh, one of those things is mine, the callback function on option changed will basically run. So then this happens and it goes through all of the options that you've got on that screen and just quickly refreshes all of them at once. You might think that's an inefficient way of doing it. Why don't you just change the one thing that has actually changed? But it was done very deliberately because it's future-proofing for themes, which is something that's going to come down the line. So you might want to one-click change to a new theme, and then that will just refresh all of the elements on the page at once. So it just makes sense to just roll through. And usually, and you're probably not going to have like more than 20 settings for any one gauge or any one device at any time. So it's not all that inefficient. And it only runs when you actually make changes anyway. So if you're done and you're set up and you're not using the server anymore, none of this code ever runs. So it doesn't slow anything down. So let's do an example and add an extra option in there just so you can see how easy it is and how it works. So what we're going to do is make that speed unit visibility show or not show. So we'll call it the speed unit opacity and just call it speed opa. The function is going to be speed opacity changed, and it'll be LV object set style opacity of the unit. So we'll just do it to toggle the miles per hour, kilometers per hour unit, turn on and off. New value, and it will either be LV. If the new value is 1, then it's going to be LV opacity 100. And if it's 0, it'll be LV opacity 0. And we need it to do that to 0, which is part main. So that'll apply it to the whole thing. Then we'll set its default, which will be speed unit opacity. We'll start it on and then create a new one of these. So speed unit opa, speed unit show can be the label. It's a switch type. It's either a 0 or a 1. The default is whatever opa is, and speed opacity changed is what happens when it changes. So that should be it. I'm going to upload this to the board. while I wait for that, I heard Cool Guy Andy was around. Don't know why he doesn't think I'm cool. I'm cool. This is cool. We're all cool. So if we reboot the server and connect to it again, let's see what happens. And now the Speedo has 3 options, even though we've not changed anything on the server. So if we go in here, we've got speed unit show, and it's at the top, it's in miles per hour. If I get rid of speed unit show, there we go, disappears. So on, off, and then update it to miles an hour while it's off, on, all that. So like I say, we can in time create themes where we just have one click and it basically updates everything in one go and changes the entire UI based on however you might define it. Now, like I said, this is all very much in an alpha stage. It is available, so if you head to my repo down below for AutoCC, you can grab the code and actually try it and utilize it in your own, client server setup. But it is very limited. At the moment, there is a switch type, a ball and on off, and there is a range type where you can set between a min and a max value. That's it. I needed to get simple stuff working in theory before I then expanded it out into the rest of the system. Over the next weeks and months, I will add in a color picker and the ability to change strings of text to type whatever you want into there. I'll add drop-down lists so you can, define a bunch of stuff out of the box and just, choose which one of the things that you want out of that list, as well as some more overarching changes like global styles. So what if you wanted to change the background color of all of your gauges at once? We'll do that kind of stuff and allow you to have commands that get sent to everything as opposed to just being sent to one individual device, as well as probably as part of that, setting up clusters or collections. I'm not quite sure how I'll name it. So, you might say these 2 gauges are part of this cluster and these 2 gauges are part of this cluster. And I want to update just those 2 gauges, so you can cluster them and start to do cool stuff like that. But I'm, currently a one-man army doing all of the software and all of the examples and all of the hardware and liaising with all of the manufacturers, as well as creating these videos every week. My time is incredibly stretched. I'm like, what is it Bilbo says? I feel sometimes like butter spread over too much bread. But so if you want to use it, you can. But like I say, it is limited. It will become less limited quite quickly. And once I get it to a point pretty soon, I'm going to open source it and allow other people to, make alterations and upgrades and improvements and whatever they want to it. And submit those. So it's all coming, but one little step at a time. Yeah, I find it funny that this thing that I started 8 months ago with the absolute intention of it being for something else has ended up kind of working its way into the existing project. It's almost like the channel from the start had this concept of this thing that we were going to do, and I didn't maybe even know it myself at that point in time. Now, I know I mentioned it earlier. I'm going to mention it again. The custom screens, like the anti-glare high brightness screens and the PCBs that support them, which are going to be made perfectly for all of this and, for taking data off your canvas and ESP now and loads of protections and this whole ecosystem of stuff, are available. They're exclusively over at garagetinkering.com. They're in pre-order at the moment. We've basically hit the minimum order threshold for actually taking these boards to production. It actually looks like more likely the case is we're going to run out of the pre-orders. So if you want to get your hands on the first round of these at a lower price, because there is an introductory price on them, I'd do it sooner rather than later. Also, if you do pick up these boards or screens, you're supporting me and this channel, and I'm obviously very thankful for that. But it does, keep me alive and allows me to create all of this content and free software and stuff for you. So everyone's a winner. Anyway, it'd be really good to hear about what you think about this whole thing. Do you get it? What kind of options do you think I should actually add into it? I've said about color picker and string text and drop-down menus. What else should we do? What would be really useful? Let me know in the comments. Otherwise, if you want to talk to me directly, you can join our Discord. We've got loads of us over there talking about our cool variety of ongoing projects. The link, again, as usual for that is in the description. And otherwise, whatever you do with the rest of your day, folks, have a wicked one. And I'll see you in the next video, Wednesday at 2 p.m. Take it easy, peeps. Bye-bye.